Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here, and thank you for the invitation from my colleague, the Minister for Business, Enterprise and Innovation, Heather, to be here and just conclude this important session and to say a few words to you about how important I believe this initiative to be, where I think we're going economically at the moment, and how I see an initiative like this fitting into the journey of travel. I'm sure by this point in the morning, the number of rugby analogies and teamwork analogies that you have received is at peak saturation. And if it's not, you'll have to ask all of the other speakers, where were they last Saturday night? And what were they doing that was possibly more important than watching what was going on here? So the only point I make from that is, if you look at the broad journey that I think has happened in Irish rugby, if you look at the journey that has gone on there, the journey as represented by that extraordinary team, it is a pursuit of excellence. And it's a pursuit of excellence at an individual level, and it's a pursuit of excellence at a team level, and it's an unrelenting ethic of trying to get behind that, and of excellent leadership both on and off the pitch. And in many ways, that I think offers an appropriate framework for where we all are here this morning, and the different issues and opportunities that I know you have all been debating. But if we're marking the anniversary of nearly a week of one amazing thing that happened here, what some of you may be aware of is that today actually marks the 60th publication of the publication for the Programme of Economic Development that heralded a profound shift in the direction of our state and our engagement with the outside world that has enabled, in the 60 years that have passed since then, and in particular the last 30 years, an absolute overhaul in living standards in our country, enabled by a profound shift in the nature of the Irish economy. Now, we have few frameworks that compare to that. I think if you were to look at the full sweep of the history of our country, you'd have to look at the Good Friday Agreement as being another example of a framework that can shift the direction of travel. It's very possible that the work that's underway that will conclude early next year in relation to the agreement that we have with the United Kingdom and the European Union will also be a similar framework that will have a journey-changing impact on where our country is going. So those kind of frameworks, and the frequency of them is low, as it should be in the life story of any nation. But within those frameworks, we have many, many examples of interventions that are put in place that really change the direction of part of our country, of part of our society, or indeed of the economy. And one of those examples was the Action Plan for Jobs that was implemented by the last government, that was led by Minister Richard Bruton. The work in relation to that was continued by Minister Frances Fitzgerald in her work. And that was a plan that we all know, due to the leadership, the commitment, and the attitude of many leaders like you all over our country, all over our island, created an environment in which we were able to do something that in our darkest days looked impossible. We were able to move our economy away from dealing with a vast employment crisis, on top of every other crisis we were dealing with at that point, to a situation now where this week we confirmed that there are now 2.13 million people at work in our country, and that we are on a journey to reaching an economy that is characterised by full employment. And why this initiative is so important, and why the work that Minister Humphreys and her team are doing is so important, is they are recognising that if one framework was appropriate for the journey we've made over the last number of years, then a new framework is needed for the kind of journey we now have to embark on in the coming period of years. And in order for that framework to work, it has to be one that has engagement, that has inclusion, that leads to a framework that doesn't have just agreement, but it also has commitment. And that's why the work here of this morning is really, really important. And there's a couple of points that I'd like to emphasise in the work that is now going to accelerate after this morning that I think is going to be really important. The first one is we are going to have to make choices. We will not be able to deliver everything for every sector of the economy. We were able to do that for a period of time in which we had such a vast economic need facing us, and when we had, as economists would refer to, slack productive capacity. We all know that being the human dimension of people either being unemployed, underemployed, offices not full, factories with more capacity, service industries that could deliver more. But we are clearly at a different point now, and we are going to have to make choices regarding what we do, recognising the key fact of we clearly have capacity constraints that could begin to develop across next year, and recognising the fact that while we have balanced our books, that we're now one of those pool of budgets and group of countries that are being recognised as being fully compliant with our European obligations. That's a journey that we need to continue on. It means we're going to have to get ourselves to a place of running regular surpluses. It means then that within that framework we will have to make employment choices and choices regarding how we support individual sectors. And what Heather and her team are looking to do is to look at the framework that will enable us to do that. The second key issue that we will have to reflect on, that I know has been a key theme of today, is where we are with productivity. And my own department, in conjunction with the OECD, and I know they were represented here today, published a paper earlier on in the year that's a stark reminder of how far we have come in some parts of our economy, and a salutary reminder of what we need to do in other parts of our economy. And that is an issue that we are going to have to find new ways of addressing. The three things that make a difference to the performance of an economy in the long run: the number of people you have in it and their age, the productivity level of those individuals, and the third one, which you hear spoken less about by economists, but more about other people, are the quality of your institutions, whether they be political, social, or economic. That third element of it, where we are, the middle element of it, where we are with productivity, how we can move that forward, is an imperative, particularly as we look at the median level of productivity not improving, and particularly as we look at one sector of our economy seeing productivity levels that are moving further and further ahead. And then the third area that I think we'll all need to engage on is where we are with participation levels within our economy. I point to, and you should all be proud of, is where we are with employment levels within our economy. That's the furnace, it's the engine that allows us to move everything else forward. But we should be aware of the fact that participation levels within our economy are still lower than they have been in the past. And as we approach potential supply constraints, it's even more important that we look at the reasons why a number of our citizens are not participating in the employment market in the way we think they could be. So there are three issues that are going to be really important to me as we all work under Heather's leadership to put in place this framework. As I said, what it's recognising really clearly is that if we have new challenges, if we have new opportunities, if we're in a world where autonomous intelligence, let alone artificial intelligence, is going to be more and more a constant theme in your lives, in your companies, in our personal lives, if we're in a world where change is now a constant, whether it be Brexit, whether it be what could happen in international taxation, whether it could be what will happen in how we deal with new forms of economic activity, and if we're in a world in which new challenges are developing right in front of our eyes, such as what is happening in climate change and the severe and significant challenges that's going to pose for Ireland, it's even more important we engage and work with you to understand now what can we do in relation to not only the creation of jobs, but the retention of jobs and ensuring they're of sufficient quality to meet the needs of citizens and to meet your needs as investors and as leaders of employers and employees within our society. That's the shared challenge we have. What we now need to do is develop a shared agenda. This is the work that Heather has underway, and what I'd like to do here this morning is just underscore the commitment that I have to working with Heather, working with all of you to complete this work and to ensure that we have a new approach for a new economy in a world that is changing in front of our eyes. So thank you for attending this morning. And through Heather and with myself, really look forward to working with all of you in terms of not only developing this framework, but then making it happen. Thank you.